In Dubliners, James Joyce presents a series of 15 short stories concerning residents of Dublin, all set around the beginning of the 20th century. The stories are unconnected, no character appears more than once, and in pretty much all cases their actions are presented for us to observe only. Joyce does not make judgments on the actions his characters take, whether they be good or bad, he merely presents them. Originally, this review was going to be very negative in its tone. This was because the major flaw in the book, as I saw it, was the lack of dramatic tension in many of the stories, whether it be the get-together of society jockeys in After the Race, the family party in Clay, or the reminiscences over the life and death of Irish politician Charles Parnell in Ivy Day in the Committee Room. I found the meandering, slice-of-life tone of these stories, and others, to be dull and frustrating to read. In fact, I had thought that I was originally going to recommend maybe 4 out of the 15 stories as being worth reading. But when I looked back through the titles, I found myself remembering a line or a phrase in each one that had moved me or made me laugh, something which had demonstrated a spark of great writing. Furthermore, I found after a day or two that some of the stories I had dismissed as either dull or melodramatic were sticking with me like a slow-release narcotic, disturbing, saddening, and in some ways spiritual. If you're looking for disturbing stories, then look no further than An Encounter, in which 2 young boys meet up with an apparently kindly stranger who shows himself to be a little too interested to talk about using corporal punishment as a means of maintaining discipline over young children. Or the flip-side tales of Counterparts and A Cloud, in which men take out their disappointments over the ways in which their lives have panned out on their children, a pattern which must still be as relevant today as it was in early 1900s Dublin. Sadness and melancholy hang over many of the characters in the stories, but never more hauntingly than in A Painful Case, in which a prim and respectable man decides to end an affair he has had with a woman in a loveless marriage, to return to his staid ways as a bachelor. Reading about her death in an apparent accident gives him cause to reflect on how his actions contributed to her loneliness. But it's the realization about how he has imposed a self-sentence of isolation on himself, and how that comes home to him in an empty park, which gives the story a real kick to the reader. Religion and spiritualism play a part in the collection, but while it peters out into a tedious sermon in grace, it is much more successfully explored in the final story, The Dead. The effect that his wife's remembrance of the dead man who was her first true love has on her protagonist Gabriel is very moving to read. The realization that someone has already had the feelings he has had for his wife, coupled with the sense that he has never inspired feelings in a woman like those that this dead man has left in his wife, are thoughts that would surely drive any man to madness if he were to contemplate such matters too closely. But in doing so, Gabriel, and by extension Joyce and the reader, are transported to a region where the gap between living and dead is so imperceptibly slight that it is easy to slip from one into the other. At least I think that's how it ends anyway. There's still space in the collection for humour and lighter moments. I had great sympathy for the young teenager in Araby, desperately trying to buy a gift for his neighbour's sister 10 minutes before the bazaar shuts, or the protagonist of The Boarding House, who finds himself seemingly manipulated into marriage by the landlady and her daughter, and goes to it with the genuine air of one knowing that he is leaping foot first through the gallows. If I have one word of advice to anyone thinking of reading this collection, then it would be to pick a copy which has a commentary or notes on the text. There are any number of words that will fly over the head of the reader, and as I didn't have any notes or commentary, they flew over mine, and may well have impinged on my enjoyment of the book. I cannot flat out recommend Dubliners, because the first impressions were all too often ones of, "Is that it?" But I cannot deny that it has a strange power to it, and that it is a piece of work that will, in differing shades of light and darkness, come back to haunt those who read it.